All right, so goals today, and who the heck am I? So I don't know who's in the room. And so I'm generally gonna assume that we'll be talking about the contributions that rehabilitators are making to the field of conservation. It might be news to some of you, might not be news, might be a combo. And I also want to offer encouragement to New York State Master Naturalists for future collaborations with wildlife rehabilitators. So who am I? My name is Nick Smith. My pronouns are they and them. I'm a licensed veterinary technician. I'm a master naturalist, and I'm a wildlife rehabilitator and have been for about 15 years. Most of it, though, and you'll see this throughout the presentation, was as a full-time lead medical staff at a wildlife hospital in California. I've been rehabilitating wildlife and doing community education work since I've been in New York State, which is since 2017. The place that I run is called Mutual Aid Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, and we do a bunch of community education around things like intersectional environmentalism and reciprocity. Those are two sort of core tenets of the work that my nonprofit does. And of course, we do a fair amount of, this is a snake kind of education too. We try to combine those things together though, because they're not separate worlds. Thinking about environmentalism as an intersectional concern and thinking about community reciprocity. Real quick, reciprocity just means exchange for mutual benefit, particularly in cases of an imbalance or disproportionate distribution of resources. And so that's something that we talk about. I also do a lot of rehabilitator support and training. I remember when I was a fledgling, pun intended, and so it's really important to me to work with rehabilitators in New York and also around the country. And I'm always looking for more collaborators. We are nothing without our community, and so for me, this work is very deeply rooted in wanting to be a part of a community and wanting to connect with my community and support it. And that's, all organisms within it, humans too. And a little plug right here, something that I am hoping to do in the next couple of years is do some post-rehab release studies of hatched turtle eggs. I get a lot of turtle eggs in care from moms who don't make it. But we're able to harvest the eggs and we incubate and hatch and release them. And I'm curious in New York State for some more factual information about how successful that is and wanting to learn how to make it more successful. Quick thing here. This picture is of a peregrine falcon, and I just thought I'd open with this story. A few years ago, when I was working and living in California, I lived in Oakland, and I was a volunteer or like an assistant at Wild Care was the place that I worked anyway, I was a young in the position and young in the work. And I was in downtown Oakland, and I got a frantic call from someone who said that there was a peregrine falcon downed in Oakland. And as I'm sure many of you or all of you might know, peregrine falcons are a sexy animal. They're an animal of concern. They're an animal that is popular. And so by the time I got there to help the peregrine who was downed in the downtown Oakland courtyard, there was quite a crowd there. And, as a rehabilitator, my only goal supposedly was to grab the bird and get the bird into care. But what I did instead is I used the crowd to help keep the bird contained and safe. I did capture the bird, and while the bird was, he or she hit a window trying to get a pigeon, and so I packed the bird up and did spend a little bit of time there with that huge crowd of people, telling them what the bird was, why I was there, what was going to happen. And really spending a little bit of time. Yes, the bird needed to get into care, but as many of you might know, what was more important for the bird was a stressful and dark and quiet environment, and that's what he was in, so I could take that moment. And then when the bird was released, a significantly large crowd was there for the release back in downtown Oakland. And again, it was another great moment for working with the community. I totally could have grabbed the bird and run away. I totally could have released the bird quietly when the bird was ready for release, but I try to take every moment possible to work with the public. I think that's a super equally important part of my job as a rehabber. And then I had another quick story for you about black-crowned night herons, and also in Oakland. Same kind of story. We had a rookery in a high traffic area downtown, and babies were falling from the sky, literally, yeah, nestling black-crowned night herons. And so I would drive by there and go there every morning in May to see who was on the ground, to see who was alive, and needed help, and get them into care. But I never did that without having a handout to local folks about what I was doing and why I was there, seeing who wanted to volunteer or learn more. And I worked pretty extensively with a couple of other local rehab centers and local Audubon to try to mitigate that situation. And so again, just a couple of stories, just examples of yes, as a wildlife rehabilitator, my job is to get the animal back into the wild as quickly and as ready as possible. But it's also equally to work with folks. And so that's what I do. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about public health. We're going to talk about ecological balance, public education and awareness raising, mitigating anthropogenic harm caused by humans, and there'll be some resources. Quick little note, this is a potentially heated topic, so this is a basic introduction to what we do. And it really is to spark your own research and your own outreach. We don't have time, and it is not an invitation to have a heated debate, but I am here to present you with some information. All right, so public health. One of the reasons why wildlife rehab is so important is because of the One Health concept. And I believe we actually had a speaker on One Health last month or the month before. But One Health is really a collaborative, multi-sectoral and transdisciplinary approach, working at local, regional, national, global levels, with the goal of achieving optimal health outcomes. And that is done by recognizing the interconnection between people, plants, animals, and our environment. And wildlife rehabilitators are a big part of this One Health concept, and should be embracing it and doing that work. One of the ways in which we contribute to public health is animal health studies. The below studies are either studies I participated in or became aware of through my work at WildCare, and these are just examples. There's so many more. I'm naming the examples that I'm familiar with most closely, but I know of so many others, and so hopefully this will whet your curiosity to do some research. So striped skunks are my favorite animal to rehab, so I do a lot of work with them, and I was a part of this study. Aleutian disease. It was an emerging disease in striped skunks in California. And then there was another one, polyomavirus, associated with brain tumors in free-ranging raccoons. That was another one that my center worked on. And we were one of the first ones to identify these tumors in our raccoon patients, because we had noticed that something was different in the clinical signs, for both of these diseases, and we were able to get necropsies and started the ball rolling from some very, very interested veterinarians who then published these studies and found other animals who were suffering. And then I also then gave a talk at a national conference. So we have a National Wildlife Rehabilitators Conference. It's quite a professional, large conference. And I gave a talk on the novel polyomavirus, on Aleutian disease, neurotoxin rodenticide bromethylin, and clinical signs of distemper, and sort of looked at all of these things and was able to put together with our hospital a better idea to help rehabilitators who don't have access to research, or to veterinarians who can do laboratory research on their patients, to better help them rule out conditions. And so that was a really important part of, after we've done these studies, and these studies were over different years, altogether, they gave us quite a good picture of helping to identify different clinical signs from these diseases and other potential diseases, and present that information to veterinarians, biologists, and rehabilitators alike to better understand those diseases. So that was pretty cool. And then also we do work around emerging threats. So that would be highly pathogenic avian influenza, white nose syndrome, West Nile virus, epizootic hemorrhagic disease. All of those diseases, wildlife rehabilitators have been a part of identifying and also treating when treatment is possible. And then here's another one. I can't tell how big this is for y'all, but this is a study that WildCare again was a part of. I wasn't there, but this was about a fungal disease in snakes. And so, again, just a similar, really cool study that was heavily reliant upon the work of wildlife rehabilitators. This little image here is of the One Health concept. So there's also been advances in veterinary and human medicine. Wound management, for example, the use of tilapia for human burn victims is informed by the use of it with burn survivors from California wildfires. So that was pretty cool. I don't know who first came up with it. I'm sure I could do the research, but the information gained from our use of it with burn survivors has been useful. Avian limb immobilization and skin grafting. I had the chance to work with a really pioneering veterinarian, Dr. Rebecca Doerr, and she has really perfected some amazing techniques with waterfowl, but birds in general. And that's through her work with wildlife rehabilitation. Lead toxicity treatment, rodenticide and other pesticide diagnostics, nutrition, data throughout maturation we are able to collect while they're captive, stomach contents and intake, excuse me. Pharmacokinetics we contribute to. There was a study on meloxicam, there's several studies on meloxicam tolerance and efficacy in a number of different avian species, and that can help inform people working with birds in zoos and working with pet birds. Pain management, there have been some really amazing discoveries around the experience of pain in reptiles and amphibians and in fish, and that was informed by rehabilitation. And then also reproductive health. We have access and get to see things in the life stages of animals that most people don't get to see. You know, things that happen with pregnant and nursing mothers, and changes. We get to measure changes in hormones and see changes in behavior and those kinds of things. We're able to gather that information and pay attention to it. We use it ourselves internally, but then also it's important information to get out to other folks. At one point, we were getting a large number of declining turkey vultures in care. Very weak. I'm not going to go through all the clinical signs, but working with a couple of different agencies and doing our own medical sampling, we were able to diagnose this, the turkey vultures with barbiturate overdose. And it turns out there was a local farmer who was not bearing euthanized livestock appropriately. And so, you know, wildlife were what told us that that was happening. And so, you know, we can thank those turkey vultures. Most of them we were able to save. So that was pretty great that we got them in time. Other changes and things in public health that we've contributed to, again, we're really on the front lines. So oil spill response, I'm extensively trained in oil spill response. And there's quite a deep level of work that goes into oil spill response, and it's constantly sort of cutting edge science. So common responses and issues, rehabilitators are the ones who are treating the animals, who are collecting the animals, who are hazing other animals from going into the oil area, who are teaching other professionals how to do this portion of oil spill response. And really important release statistics. So I know that there is an ongoing brown pelican post-oil spill release tracking, and there's so much interesting information is gleaned from these birds. Other environmental harms like domoic acid in Southern California, I think it was affecting sea lions, algal blooms, which I know we all deal with here in the lakes, the Finger Lakes, and other mortality events and disease surveillance in general. So white nose syndrome is something that I mentioned just a moment ago. Rehabilitators are a big part of the discovery of this disease, learning how to treat it and giving that recommendation to other people. And then also our big part of why it's turned around. And so it's not gone. It's still a very bad, bad syndrome, but wildlife rehabilitators have been a part of treating and reducing transmission. Similarly, wild reservoirs of other diseases that we're concerned about, particularly zoonotic diseases, diseases that humans can get from animals. Wildlife rehabilitators are often getting those animals in care. And rabies vaccine development. A lot of the work that goes into trying to mass vaccinate rabies vector species and understanding how the vaccine efficacy is and pharmacoavailability, all of those things are contributed to by wildlife rehabilitators. Again, this isn't wildlife rehabbers alone. This is in collaboration with other agencies and with biologists and with other folks who are interested, but we're an important part of that puzzle. And the natural disasters and disaster response teams. I was asked, even though I had moved here at the time of Hurricane Harvey, my hospital called and asked me, since it was during a very busy baby season, which is what we call spring and summer, and they needed someone to head up their response team to Houston. And so I went down, I led a team of volunteers, and we participated in, there was one singular person who was getting reptiles in one after another. Some were wildlife, some were pets, some it was unclear. And just helping her get everybody set up and cared for and monitored and quarantined, and all of that work rehabilitators helped to do. I provided consultation when I was there on the local care that was happening, on the emergency response. I'm not an expert, but what information I was able to share, I did that as a part of that work. And so there's a lot of cross collaboration between the states and between rehabilitators in other parts of the world. And that's really cool. And we're able to help, we were able to help some of the trauma that happened to wildlife in Houston. Other advances in conservation science are some of these data-driven things that we learn. So population studies, we gather data related to number and nature of our calls and intakes. We actually have a pretty extensive record-keeping system that we use, that we share with the DEC, of course, we have to, but then also with other folks doing research. We have great data related to diet and then behavior while in care, while under observation, but away from humans, we get some really great information. I'm going to list here a number of different studies. I know that it's very small, and I'm sorry about that. But hopefully folks will have access to the YouTube video to be able to look a little bit more closely. But there have been a number of studies about relocation of animals that rehabilitators have been a part of. So factors affecting translocation failure in raccoons is one. The study examines the factors influencing the success of raccoon translocation efforts in urban areas. There was an eastern box turtle relocation study, post-release survival and habitat selection of translocated eastern box turtles. That one was also really good and really interesting about the trauma and stress and decreased survival that eastern box turtles, which are a very special animal, that they experience during translocation. Okay. Some more things, migratory patterns. So we get data on when patients arrive, what time of year, what the weather's like, what's happening, the common issues that migratory birds and other animals who migrate experience that brings them into care, their recoverability from their issues, and then bird banding access. We are able, with all of our patients, to work with federally licensed bird banders, and the host of data that we get from that alone is really important. I had the opportunity to care for a 12-year-old hummingbird. And the reason I know it was a 12-year-old male hummingbird, bonus points if anyone can put in the chat what species of hummingbird this is. But I was able to care for this hummingbird who had the tiniest band I'd ever seen. And that band, we looked into the website, and we looked at the history, and this bird was 12 years old and had been migrating, I forget where from in the South, but through California, through the Bay Area. So we were just a stopping point, had been migrating from there up to Alaska for 12 years. 12 years in a row, this bird had successfully done it. Unfortunately, what brought the bird down, because the bird was in otherwise excellent condition, was the cat, and the bird was not able to be released. But we learned a lot about that bird, about the species, and when we see them, what usually the kinds of things that they run into. Again, it's just one bird. But the thing about rehab is every one animal could be just that one that tips the scale information that we need to be gathering. That's really important. Anybody want to wager a guess on the species? Tell Christy what you think.
I saw somebody guess a cinnamon hummingbird and a ruby-throated hummingbird.
Oh, nope. Unfortunately, it's a California bird. So New York, Master Naturalist, you're off the hook. It's a rufous hummingbird. Very beautiful, beautiful little bird.
It is.
And then also we do participate in studies on rehabilitation efficacy, and that's extremely important. There aren't enough of those studies. That's the study that I'm most interested in. I've done a lot of the medical studies, a lot of treatment. I've been a part of discovery of diagnosis. Studies I'm most currently interested in right now is rehab efficacy. We have a lot of anecdotal information. We have a strong volume of anecdotal information, but not a lot of peer-reviewed study. And so the ones that I find, I read voraciously, and here are a few. Evaluation of post-release survival and movement of juvenile bald eagles, post-rehab movements of loggerhead sea turtles, survival and movement patterns of the harbor seal pup, and then post-release movements of red-tailed hawks. So that's just a couple. We also work towards ecological balance as a part of our work. So we get in threatened species and indicator species and keystone species, and I don't have to tell y'all how important all of those species are. And so coming to us and getting care is really important and can be scale tipping. I participated in Oakland in this Western pond turtle Head Start program that the Oakland Zoo was doing. Super great study. We had a Western pond turtle hit by a car in care. She laid these eggs while in care, and she was eventually released. She did really great, but she laid a few eggs, and I had the amazing responsibility of incubating them. And once they were hatched, and most of their yolk sac was absorbed, and then took them over to the Oakland Zoo, where they each got to join the Head Start program. They basically gave them a longer period in care as hatchlings to ensure their survival upon release, or to better ensure their chances of survival upon release. We get healthy animals back to an ecosystem, and we remove non-viable animals from that system. Vector animals can be removed. Animals who've recovered from disease and are not vectors can be released as well. And that helps with making and keeping populations healthy and reducing disease transmission. We also do habitat protection work. So we advocate for things like change at animal crossings, whether that's putting up signs or making, overpasses. We do help with that work as well. And we do engage in habitat restoration. One of the things that I do as a rehabber is I pay close attention to population stories of animals that I work with, and making sure that when I release them, they're in a healthy place, they're in a place that they came from if they're adults, and as juveniles, as close as possible to where they came from. And part of that work is making sure there's healthy habitat for them to go to. And so we can't always, I do not release anything in my backyard unless it came from my backyard, or the chance of survival in my backyard is strong because I have some acreage and it's nice and safe. But we do, if I have to get an animal back to an area that's unsafe, I do my best to see if we can make the area safe. And that's an important part of the work we do. And then cascading effects and the prevention of those. So when you think about removing native species from an environment and the effects of that, this is largely something that happens with predators, other animals too, however, but coyotes are a deeply villainized animal who are also really important to their ecosystems. And so part of what we do as rehabbers is help with the education about this, and also in general just help getting coyotes home. They're a very fun species to rehabilitate. And then also we mitigate and harm. So most of the wildlife that comes into care is because of humans. There's the myth of natural causes and letting nature take its course is a big one. For the most part, the animals that are, I'll go back. No, I guess I'll just stop here. Most of the animals that we get in because of vehicles, because of habitat loss, because humans have interfered and orphaned an animal, thinking it was orphaned and then made it orphaned, because of window strikes, because of free roaming cats. The list goes on and on. I name a few more things later. But wildlife rehabilitators have a huge role in mitigating these harms that were caused by humans in the first place. Ethically, we end suffering. So, I think a lot about the animals who come into care who are not viable, and the gift that we can give them of euthanasia, of humane and death. And to keep this very clear, removing animals from the ecosystem that could then be food for other animals, if they are healthy enough to then be predated upon, we will feed them out to our patients. That's an important part of the work that we do, being able to give naturally occurring prey to the animals who eat them. And then just in general, accountability and responsibility to our ecosystems. Wildlife rehabilitators feel a strong sense of that, and we want to get animals home. Corridor provision or corridor removal are another issue. I think about the desert tortoise in California, and how part of the loss of the tortoise is because of the corridor creation by humans who are engaging in renewable energy work that encouraged ravens through no fault of their own, but encouraged ravens to come through. They discovered the delicious turtle nests and are yet another factor in the declining population of those tortoises. And so, so that's something that we're concerned with. Pesticides and food population impact because of those pesticides. There's been a lot of information in the world. We did a study of our own on rodenticide around how the impacts that wildlife were experiencing were harbingers of the kind of impacts that food population animals could experience. We mitigate industry impacts like flares from industry, like electrocution, extractive industry. A lot of those impacts, we help the animals who suffer from those. We deal a lot, unfortunately, with quote unquote nuisance wildlife family unit destruction. I can't tell you how many calls I got this year of, well, we found a blank, and so we removed the parent, or we killed the parent, and then we found babies, and then there were 2 generations of animals running around, and the destruction on those units, it's not just ever the one animal, it's the entire animal that depends on that animal. And then the various traps that are used, like glue traps, and the number of illegal traps, like legal traps that are used in a way that's unsafe. I can't tell you the number of skunks, I actually can tell you the number of skunks that I've treated whose paws were in rat traps, because those rat traps were put outside with no guard to keep paws from very curious animals from looking in and seeing what was in there to eat. And then, yes, these are things I just recently mentioned. So window strikes, vehicle strikes, free roaming cats. And then interference and what is a normal situation. Folks who bring us rabbits, baby bunnies all the time and put them back, put them back, put them back is a huge part of the work that we do. And then resource provision. So this is a picture here of cancerous cells in free-ranging opossums, which is an example of biological samples. One of my favorite things to do is to provide samples to vet schools and biologists and state labs. And there's a turtle researcher who was requesting carcasses all summer, and getting carcasses of turtles to him for his anatomy study. And that reduces sample collection. And that was part of his goal of working with rehabilitators, as he realized the wealth of carcass availability. And I don't mean to laugh, but we have them in our freezers, and to dispose of when we have when we reach a certain number. And he is able to take those samples and use them for his anatomy study without having to take from the wild. So yeah, our data is used in policy and advocacy. So a lot of these public campaigns that folks have been a part of or made aware of have data from wildlife rehabilitators. Bald eagles and California condors, species who we wanted to make sure recovered and were reestablished, relied on data from rehabilitators. Ecosystem dynamics, so we can provide data on migratory patterns and diet and shelter choices that animals are making. We can track trends of disease progression and where it pops up. And so we have that data, and that's given, shared. And then we're a volunteer force, right? Like, very few of us in New York State do this to be paid. I don't know currently anybody who's a paid rehabber in New York. And so part of our work is conservation efforts in general. So we help promote them. We take part in campaigns. We can provide bodies. We can bring bodies. So I just talked about carcasses bodies, but I'm talking about living human bodies. We also can provide community support for work that folks are doing. And then public education. So we do a lot of awareness raising. We talk about conservation in our communities. And one of the things I do with folks is look at conservation efforts in their backyards. And this is something that I say a lot, the raccoon that comes in because it fell through a wall in a home. Yes, I'm gonna see if that raccoon needs care. And caveat, I'm not currently licensed for rabies vector species in New York, so this is anecdotal or historical information until my license is complete. I'm not rehabilitating rabies vector species currently, but I get calls all the time and still assist and get them to where they need to go, to the folks who have those licenses. But this is a great example. A raccoon comes in who's fallen into a kitchen because it's housing in the rafters, and it'll come into care. And sure, the basic rehabilitator work is to get that animal back home again, which unfortunately is the rafters of the house. But what I would do then is not stop there. And I would work with the people and discover what conservation issues are existing in their community that cause the raccoon to move into their home. If they need help figuring out about patching that hole, I don't have a lot of money or a lot of skill in that area, but I help people figure it out. Because when they call me, it's not just the raccoon that they're calling that's calling me. They're the ones dialing, and I want to make sure they get that support. So raising awareness about all the things we've mentioned, about the human impact is really important. And there can never be too much public education on this topic. And so we do that a lot. When people bring me animals that are harmed because of these issues, which is, again, the majority of the animals that come in, I tell them, unfortunately, this is the reason why this animal is not going to be able to be released. And then I say, yeah, it's horrible. Let's work to keep it from happening again. And it's because we know that people will protect what they love. But then working with folks to realize that what they love is part of my work. Community service is another important part of our work. Wildlife need highly trained professionals. Your local vet, your local wildlife lover, your local nurse, your local biologist, all amazing people, not necessarily have the right training to do this, and wildlife rehabilitators do. We talk with folks about how to be a good ecosystem member. And the reason why I say it like that is that we are not outside of these ecosystems that we are working in, right? We are players too. And so, bridging that gap of being external to an ecosystem and understanding that we are a part of it as well is a part of the work that we do. Also, I teach a lot about exclusion. And when I say that, what I mean is the work that needs to be done if you have a wildlife issue in your home. And right now, I'm going to tell you, red squirrels, I love them so much. Absolutely getting ready for their winter residence here at my house. But instead of putting out poison or trapping and moving, we're working to exclude them. It's a lot of work, and it's worth it because it gets them to move on their own at a time that's healthy for them to do so that they have enough time to cache food for the winter, so that they're not, and if there's, whatever. Anyway, I could talk about this all in one entire thing. We work with folks to exclude animals, so that means making animals leave of their own choice, rather than forcing that and breaking up families and causing animals to die. And then public advocacy, if we can, we get involved in campaigns all the time. I've done, I'm trying to think, work around not releasing turtles into brackish water, for example, and having to campaign with the public around that. And that's because we were getting turtles in who were not brackish water loving turtles. And then also we can provide hands-on and up-close safe interaction where legal. It does not involve touching, unfortunately, not the animals that I work with. Even the educational ambassadors for the animals that are able to make it through the very rigorous requirements to be kept in captivity for the rest of their lives. Once they make it there, petting is still not an option. Okay. And other license required activities like getting feathers that are spiritually important to indigenous populations, because they do have the licenses to hold those animals. Being able to work with folks to see talons and see things as long as those licenses are in place, but being able to share very real things with people up close in a way that they might not have otherwise been able to learn. And so rehabbers can do that too. And then, so public education, another facet of that is harm reduction, which means decreasing the numbers that we have come into our hospitals unnecessarily. Campaigns for driving safely, fishing lines and nets, and hook removal. This gull did have a successful removal of that hook. Lead ammo, tree trimming, feeding local ducks, dealing with random birds nesting in random places. I don't know about you, but the goose in the parking lot is my favorite. But helping to reduce harm that happens because of those things. We're there so the public doesn't have to be. That's important. And we can cause and create a generational impact on humans and the animals we release. What that means is, I had a woman bring me a hit by car snapping turtle. The snapping turtle, unfortunately, was in very rough shape and had to be humanely euthanized. But generationally, I just recently, not that recently, actually, I feel like winter's come along quickly, but I was able to release some of her hatchlings back to habitat. And that is a generational impact, right? Getting some hatchlings back into the world. She didn't make it, but her genetic material did. And then the woman who brought me that turtle and I spent a good deal of time with her children, explaining to them what happened and why and what we can do about it. And again, that's 2 generations of a human family that are impacted. And so, we're a part of that. That is some of the magic for me of the work that I do. And we do some myth dispelling too. Skunks and everything about them. Tomato juice not going to cut it. When they spray, how they spray, what the spray is made of. Again, I could talk for hours on this topic as well. Coyote behavior, again, villainized animal. So talking about how to live well with coyotes. Snapping turtles, the strength of their jaw will break men's arms, things like that, and working with folks to dispel that truth or that myth and tell them the truth, which is snapping turtles want to be in the muck and left alone unless they're coming out to mate or lay eggs. And they, aren't gonna nip at your toes. Rabies vector species being seen out during the day, that doesn't mean that animal has rabies. And so working with the public to understand, okay, sure, there is a fox in your yard right now. There's a skunk. There is a raccoon. There's a non-rabies vector species, a possum, in my yard during the day. Let's talk about why. Is it a mom with babies weighed down who didn't get to the cover of darkness soon enough? Is it a young raccoon who's still learning foraging and is not doing a great job? Is it a mom who's out because she didn't get enough food last night and she's got babies to feed? So, working with folks to understand those things. And then this is just a little list of some of the other workshops that I've done. And I talk a little bit more about sort of the tenets that drive my work, like ecological justice and reciprocity. I've done a super fun workshop on sex and gender in the animal kingdom. Introductions to environmental racism, living well with wild neighbors, owl pellets, and then an explanation of the interconnectivity of our ecosystems. Captive care for snakes and skunks. Those are for rehabilitators, of course, not for the public. And by captive care, I mean while they're in our care, not as permanent residents. And then a few other things on nonprofit management and deeper dives into wildlife veterinary medicine. That's some of the work that we do too. We also work with a local summer camp, which is the most fun. So we're coming to the end of our time together. These are broad-footed mole babies that I raised. Wildlife rehabilitation is not a time to cuddle with wild animals or get a new pet. And we absolutely, when folks see what we do and want to get involved, we have to make sure that that's off the table. It's not just a hobby. It's really a calling. I know for me it is. It's not a way to keep an animal alive just because you love it. Sometimes what's best for the animals that we love in our care as rehabilitators is to euthanize. It's not a pointless drop in a bucket. It's never just that one animal. If you have one takeaway today, is that it's never just that one animal that we are, interfering with or interacting with or impacting. It's the people who brought the animal in, the people who found the animal, the people who they talk about this with, the other animals in that family unit. Animals for future generations of that animal, or animal of future generations of others of similar species, but not that family, who are left alone because someone has learned how not to interfere with them. It's definitely not a money-making endeavor. I'm currently in the act of quitting my full-time job to run my center in full-time capacity. Check in with me in a year, how rich I've become. We are not a drop-off spot for nuisance animals. That's a big one. We're not a place for pest control operators to bring the baby raccoons they found after they relocated mom. We're not a place for you to bring all the opossums that you keep finding in your backyard. We will tell you to take it home. But I will also work with you to, if there's a problem you're experiencing, help you all work together or live together in a better way. And it's not devoid of science or medicine. Yes, most of us in New York are at-home rehabbers, but we learn from each other. We have an amazing conference every year. I know even as an LVT, I have to do continuing education. So, this is not a field that's necessarily cutting edge. There are pockets of it, and we contribute to those. But we have to pursue educational opportunities, and we have to learn from each other, and we do. And we're not just a hotline to keep the DEC lines free. That is something I read in an article that someone said once. We do way more than that. Although I do run a hotline, and I do answer calls. That's absolutely my work, but keeping the DEC lines free is not the main motivator. And it's not for everyone. I've talked a little bit about euthanasia. I'll let you know that the majority of our animals, well, no, sorry, excuse me, let me back it up. I would say that 60 to 65% is my goal of a release rate. And that's usually not counting the animals who don't make it in the first 24 hours, either due to euthanasia or they passed away. So it's a hard job. And because we don't get to cuddle them, and we don't want to, I can tell you all the things that have bitten me when I haven't been trying to cuddle them, let alone. But, it's a hard job. Euthanasia is tough. I'm vegan, and for other folks who are, well, mostly vegan, I have to say, not quite all the way there yet. But we have folks who want to do this work, and it's got to be made very clear that part of my work is feeding animals to other animals, and it's not pretty, but it's the ecosystem that we live in, and it's the work that we do. So yeah, there are times when this work isn't for everybody. And also, 100%, our animals have to be 100% release ready too, right? So something that an animal can recover from, if a dog is experiencing it, well, the dog's in captive care, right? It's in care its whole life and can be monitored, and as things progress can be medicated and rehabbed. But if I've got a female coyote with a shattered pelvis, sure, a dog we could work with and get them in cage care, but a coyote, for the amount of time it's supposed to be in care, and the fact that it's a female who's going to have a viable birth canal, but I'm not going to be there to see if it's working, that is not a releasable animal, and that's hard. But yeah, it's a strain on our resources to bring us animals that we can't, that are not unhealthy, or orphaned. And so that's an important thing for folks to know too. But what wildlife rehabilitation is an amazing way to connect with community and build conservation efforts. I love that this is the niche that I have found to contribute to this work that's been important to me without even being named for my whole life. It's definitely a way to directly mitigate human harm in a very direct and rewarding way. It's a way to get firsthand observations that are valuable information from multiple fields. Yes, we're definitely under-resourced. We don't get any funding unless we pursue funding through donations and foundations. We're also under-resourced in terms of the number of people who do this work. We're under-resourced in terms of time, and we're really reliant upon the community. And we're often overlooked as a community partner in efforts. When local organizations here are doing work that I think is dope, I call them and I'm like, how can I contribute to that? And how can we work together? Because we have intersecting interests here. And we are relied upon resource for those who utilize us. And we are for everyone to support in whatever way that's meaningful to you. This isn't a secret request for donations, by the way. That's not why I'm here. All right, so concluding, because we don't have much time left, wildlife rehab is just one tool among many multifaceted endeavors to combat ecological harm. By having open and respectful dialogue, we can absolutely find common ground and work together towards a shared goal of protecting wildlife and their habitats. And so with that in mind, collaborate, join forces for campaigns, public education topics, community events, ask rehabbers to table at things that you're doing, and we'll ask you to table at things that we're doing. Ask us for data and carcasses and tissue samples. I worked with a researcher who needed tissue samples of great horned owls, and so we allowed them to get those from animals who were in our care. We made it as trauma reductive, right, harm reductive as possible, that collection. But it was super important data that the researcher needed and didn't have to go capture owls out of the wild to get that information. And then carcasses, I was the hit of my anatomy class in veterinary tech school when I brought in, animals for evaluation, carcasses. So, they learned about hemipenes and owl ears being where they're placed, and rabid snakes and woodpecker tongues and os penises because of the animals that I brought in. And I also had quite the show and tell for parasitology class. So there's really great things to share. And so find out what your local rehabilitators are seeing most often. Find out what they're working on. Find out what they wish they could research and wish they could do, and see where your work intersects, because we're absolutely in this together. The One Health concept is a great model of it's not we don't have to work simultaneously on the same work without joining forces. And so that's the most important thing that we can do. And so I love being both a master naturalist and a citizen ecologist and a rehabilitator. I find that those three things converge in a really amazing way to get some really cool work done. And I love that and being a part of that. So resources here, folks, please write down animalhelpnow.org. It's a really amazing free app for folks to find help for an animal near them. NYSWRC, which is the New York State Wildlife Rehabilitation Council, NWRA, National Wildlife Rehabilitation Association, and IWRC, their state, federal, international rehab associations. Project Coyote puts out some important research, International Bird Research Center. And then there's a really great study that's recent about species causes and outcomes of wildlife rehab in New York State. I have that information here so that you can find it. And again, I know this is going to go on the YouTube, so you can slow it down and get the names of all of the different studies I've mentioned. Cornell is an amazing resource. NISDEC, also a fantastic resource. We wouldn't be here without them. And then just a quick little note that all the unlabeled pics in here, either mine or from Wildcare. And then this is the last slide, a little fun infographic on what to do if you find a baby dinosaur. And then also my contact info, and we have 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Nat. That was a lot of information, a lot of great information, and it brings to mind, like, I have 100 questions in my own, but we'll start with other people's questions first.
Cool.
Let's see. So somebody asks, how do you guard against getting sprayed by skunks?
It's so funny. I can give a whole long talk about some of these topics. My two most common questions are, what have you been bitten by? And what to do about skunk spray. So you avoid it by announcing your presence. You avoid it by making sure you give them a wide berth. And you pay attention to their behavior. So skunks, like everything else, will give you plenty of warning. They'll stomp their front feet. Spotted skunks, if you're lucky enough to see one in the wild, will go up fully on their front feet. They will also do a little turn. Spotted skunks will do a little turn and show you their hind end, show you the business end. And if you are ignoring all of those signs, that's on you. But for the most part, if you approach slowly and calmly, their eyesight's horrible, but their hearing is great. You want them to know that you're there and also not feel threatened. So it's a delicate dance, but it's absolutely doable. And if you work with skunks, you're going to get sprayed. It just comes with the territory, but you can absolutely reduce it. What else?
Okay, how is tilapia used to help burn victims?
So tilapia skin is used as a secondary covering, so over burns, and Most recently in the wildfires in California, it was used on, I think, both. I'm not sure about mountain lions, but absolutely black bear feet. And it reduced the time and care for those animals. And so that's cool. And just the learning about that, the sterilizing of that skin, how that's possible to then use in wound care, is really, really amazing information for humans and animals alike.
Yeah. Okay. Could you define a vector animal?
Oh yeah, sorry. So rabies vector species are animals that have the capability of carrying a disease and spreading it. So vector, like in physics, I don't know about you, I hated physics, but I remember vectors. But so yeah, so a vector animal is an animal that is an organism that can transmit a disease, and so mosquitoes are vector as well.
Okay. Could you speak to the training that is required to become a certified rehabilitator? What type of facilities are required to do rehabilitation in your home?
So I can tell you to go to the NISDEC website and look at the rehab page because we don't have enough time. But in New York State, you are required to take a test. You are highly encouraged to learn, and the test is really it's difficult. And so, in order to take it, you hopefully have apprenticed. I wished that we required apprenticeship before licensure. But at this point in the state, you take an exam, and if you pass the exam, then a NISDEC officer comes to your home, and then you have that deeper conversation about what your home is like, what setups you're going to use, what resources you're using, and they make sure that you have an appropriate setup. And then you're able to start taking animals. Rabies vector, you have to take a long course, and then there's a number of other requirements. Like I have to get I'm really close to getting my license, and the last thing is to get my cages inspected by I forget who, USDA, I think. But yeah, so in New York State, and it does vary by state. And New York State, it's an exam, and then hopefully you're working with people. And we really recommend, and the NISDEC really does recommend, that you're working with other rehabilitators and you're attending the conference every year. I'm going to be doing some talks at our conference this year that I'm really excited about. So,
okay. Do you rehab just mammals, birds, and reptiles? What about insects?
I am waiting for the butterfly to come in with a perfectly intact and unmessed with but severed wing for me to glue together. I also do know how to do shell repair on snails, though I would prefer to only do it on our native white-lipped snail. But I will accept those animals if I have the skill to treat them. If I don't, then I will make sure they get to someone who does, or that they do get humanely euthanized if not viable, or we can't find someone to help them. But yeah, so I will accept an insect. I had a scorpion once. That was just a kidnapping, so I didn't have to do any wound care or interaction. But I did love looking at it. It was very amazing. It was in California. I had no idea that they were even there. But yeah, so I will take something if I think I can help it or know someone who can, and otherwise we figure out what else we have available to us.
Okay, and I will ask just one of my many questions, which is how do you successfully treat white nose syndrome in captivity?
So I'm not currently rehabilitating bats, but the person who I trust the most, who's on my board, Victoria from the bat rescue that's near Ithaca, she does treat them. And when I start accepting bats, I'm going to have to hit her up for how. But it's Wild Things Rehabilitation or Wild Things Sanctuary, I think, outside of Ithaca. She's the person to ask about white nose syndrome treatment because she's done it and has been successful.
Okay.